What happens when filmmakers decide the rules don't apply to them? In the 1960s, a wave of independent directors created movies so intense, so uncompromising, that censors around the world declared war on them. From blood-soaked horror to psychological nightmares, these 19 films represent cinema's most dangerous decade. A time when rebellion wasn't just on screen, it was behind the camera. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. George Romero's zombie masterpiece emerged from Pittsburgh with a budget of just $114,000 and changed horror cinema forever. The film's uncompromising vision of social collapse and its groundbreaking casting of African-American actor Dwayne Jones as the heroic lead created a new template for socially conscious horror. The film's production history exemplified the independent spirit of 1960s exploitation cinema. Financed by local investors and shot with a crew of Pittsburgh-area film enthusiasts, it proved that powerful cinema could emerge from anywhere. The collaborative spirit of the production, with crew members wearing multiple hats and working for minimal pay, created a tight-knit team that brought genuine passion to every aspect of the film. The film's ending provided devastating commentary on American violence that mainstream films wouldn't dare attempt. The ambiguity about whether his fate was accidental or intentional made the social critique even more powerful. Blood Feast, 1963. Every cinematic revolution needs a starting point, and for splatter cinema, that moment arrived with Blood Feast. Herschell Gordon Lewis wasn't chasing awards. He was chasing conversations, reactions, anything that would make audiences remember his name. What made this transformation remarkable was Lewis's background as a successful advertising executive and journalism professor at Northwestern's Medill School, teaching respectability by day while secretly planning his cinematic rebellion. His marketing expertise would prove crucial. He understood exactly how to promote the forbidden to audiences hungry for something different. The storyline barely exists. A disturbed caterer, influenced by an ancient goddess, prepares a feast that would horrify any health inspector. What Blood Feast delivered in abundance was vivid, impossible to ignore, red-paired with do-it-yourself effects that made viewers question what they were witnessing. Shot on a shoestring budget of $24,000 in sun-drenched Miami over just 4 to 9 days, the cast consisted of whoever Lewis could find willing to work for almost nothing. Most were complete amateurs with day jobs. The film's impact reached far beyond its modest Miami origins. Drive-in theaters became the perfect venues for this new form of cinematic rebellion. Theater owners discovered that controversy sold tickets. The more parents complained, the longer the lines grew. While banned outright or heavily censored in several countries, Blood Feast opened the floodgates for low-budget horror and taught filmmakers one essential lesson. If you can't go big, go for maximum impact. Faster, Pussycat! Kill! Kill! 1965. Russ Meyer's masterpiece of violence and female empowerment exploded onto drive-in screens like a feminist manifesto written in tire smoke and bloodshed. 3 go-go dancers, led by the magnificent Tura Satana, embark on a violent spree through the California desert that redefined what female characters could be in exploitation cinema. What made this film revolutionary wasn't just its violence, but its complete inversion of traditional gender roles. The women are the predators, the men are the prey, and conventional morality is discarded in favor of pure survival instinct. Meyer created something genuinely subversive, a film that empowered its female characters by making them as ruthless and capable as any male action hero. The film failed commercially upon release, but found new life in the counterculture movement of the late 1960s, becoming a favorite among audiences who appreciated its proto-feminist message, wrapped in exploitation packaging. Its influence can be seen in everything from Quentin Tarantino's films to modern action films featuring strong female protagonists. The Naked Kiss, 1964. Samuel Fuller never played it safe, and The Naked Kiss is proof. From the opening scene, a woman fighting off her abuser and tearing off a wig to reveal her bald scalp, you know you're in for a shock. The story follows Kelly, a former woman of the night trying to build a new life in a small town, only to discover that darkness and corruption lurk behind the picket fences. Fuller brought a unique perspective to filmmaking that was shaped by his experiences as a World War II infantryman and crime reporter. He had seen humanity at its worst and best, and this knowledge infused his films with a moral complexity that separated them from simple exploitation. His background covering police beats and wartime carnage gave him insights into violence and corruption that academic film school couldn't provide. Fuller tackled everything: hypocrisy, abuse of power, and a subplot so incendiary that many theaters flat out refused to show the film. The film's treatment of child abuse was years ahead of its time, addressing subjects that mainstream Hollywood wouldn't touch for decades. Fuller's unflinching approach to difficult subjects reflected his belief that cinema should confront uncomfortable truths rather than provide easy entertainment. The Naked Kiss was years ahead of its time. Critics were appalled, calling it lurid and unfit for polite audiences, and the UK banned it until 1990, when it was finally released uncut with an 18 certificate. But time has been kind to Fuller's vision. The film is now hailed as a classic of uncompromising cinema, an early example of exploitation that punches above its weight, using shock not just to titillate, but to challenge viewers' sense of comfort and morality. The Sadist, 1963. Some films thrive on atmosphere, others on shock, but The Sadist chose pure, unfiltered aggression. Director James Landis crafted this black and white, sun-baked nightmare that trapped viewers in a junkyard with an armed lunatic modeled after a real-life criminal. 3 schoolteachers stumble into his domain, and the result is a slow-motion collision of dread, suspense, and brutality. The film emerged during a unique moment in American filmmaking when ambitious young directors discovered they could create genuinely disturbing cinema outside the studio system. For cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond, this low-budget thriller became an unexpected calling card. His documentary-style approach would later influence his Academy Award-winning work on films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Arch Hall Jr. abandoned his musical comedy background for this chilling role, and the effect unsettles like any monster mask. The film's power came from its stark realism, shot in actual Los Angeles locations with handheld cameras. It felt less like a movie and more like stumbling into a real nightmare. The psychological intensity proved that exploitation films could achieve genuine artistic impact when made by filmmakers willing to push boundaries. Critics dismissed it, but genre fans recognized it as a blueprint for a new kind of American terror, one that would inspire countless slasher and home invasion films. It didn't rely on elaborate tricks or haunted houses, just one unstable individual, a handful of innocents, and a world with nowhere to run. Predictably, it got pulled from some theaters and courted controversy for its cold-blooded approach. Today, it stands as an early warning of where horror was heading. Vixen, 1968. Before mainstream cinema dared to talk about free love, Russ Meyer was already blowing up the boundaries with Vixen. Set in the Canadian wilderness, the film follows its protagonist, a fearless, independent woman, as she charms, seduces, and scandalizes everyone in her path. Nothing was too taboo for this script, not even family or social norms. Vixen represented Meyer's most commercially successful attempt to merge exploitation with social commentary. The film's frankness was matched by its political content. Discussions of the Vietnam War, civil rights, and counterculture politics were woven into the narrative alongside the provocative situations. This combination of politics and intimacy created a potent mixture that captured the zeitgeist of 1968 America. The result? Censors raided theaters, declared the film obscene, and in some states, outright banned it. Meyer fought back, arguing that the film had artistic and social value. And in the end, he managed to win several landmark court cases. Vixen became a box office success in the United States, grossing over $8 million against a budget of $70,000, a fortune for the time. The film's brash energy, wild style, and refusal to play by anyone else's rules made it a cultural lightning rod. Audiences loved it, critics despised it. In the end, its defiance made history, opening the floodgates for a new era of adult-oriented cinema. The Touch of Her Flesh, 1967. Few exploitation films are as personal or as unhinged as Michael Findlay's The Touch of Her Flesh. This fever dream explores revenge, betrayal, and obsession. After a tragic accident caused by his unfaithful spouse, a weapons dealer is left blinded, bitter, and spiraling into madness. What follows is a rampage through New York's seedy underground, with Findlay himself playing the tormented anti-hero and his real-life partner, Roberta Findlay as the object of his scorn. The husband and wife filmmaking team of Michael and Roberta Findlay represented one of exploitation cinema's most complex partnerships. Working with minimal budgets and maximum audacity, they created a body of work that pushed every boundary they could find. The couple's working relationship was as intense as their films, creating a unique brand of cinema that felt simultaneously intimate and disturbing. Findlay's direction is raw, almost anarchistic, and critics called it gutter trash, while audiences packed into grindhouses to see just how far it would go. The film's crude production values were actually part of its power. The cheap effects and amateur performances created an unsettling authenticity that polished Hollywood productions couldn't match. The film's success spawned two even wilder sequels, forming a cult trilogy that reveled in breaking every taboo it could. At a time when the old studio system was crumbling and rules were up for grabs, Findlay proved you could turn outrage into ticket revenue. The Flesh trilogy didn't just push buttons, it hit them with a hammer. Olga's House of Shame, in 1964. If you want a crash course in why women in prison movies became a phenomenon, look no further than Olga's House of Shame. The third entry in the infamous Olga series, it's a black and white plunge into cruelty, control, and cold-blooded authority. Audrey Campbell plays Olga, the warden with a heart of stone, whose preferred method of discipline includes humiliation and manipulation. The Olga series emerged from director Joseph P. Mara's understanding that audiences were hungry for films that acknowledged the darker side of power dynamics. Shot on budgets so low, they made other exploitation films look expensive. These black and white nightmares were filmed in just 4 to 5 days each. What made them particularly unsettling was their documentary-like approach. Mara filmed them like news reports from hell, creating an uncomfortable sense of reality that mainstream films avoided. The success of the Olga films helped establish the template for the women in prison subgenre that would flourish throughout the decade. These films tapped into social anxieties about authority, control, and the thin line between civilization and brutality, themes that resonated powerfully with audiences living through the social upheavals of the 1960s. At a time when most films skirted around anything controversial, Olga's House of Shame bludgeoned its way into notoriety, drawing the attention of censors in several American cities. While mainstream critics panned it, those looking for something outside the rules saw it as a rebellious statement against polished Hollywood productions, a flag planted firmly in the land of the forbidden. The Wild, Wild World of Jane Mansfield, 1968. There's exploitation, and then there's what happened to Jane Mansfield. Originally intended as a globe-trotting look at changing attitudes, The Wild, Wild World of Jane Mansfield was reworked after the star's tragic car accident on June 29, 1967. What hit screens, 1968, was a patchwork of news footage, travelogue, and every provocative performance Mansfield ever gave, with her pre-recorded narration stitched in, alongside tabloid headlines and even funeral coverage. The film represented a new low in exploitation, the literal exploitation of a star's passing for commercial gain. Yet it also captured something profound about celebrity culture and the public's insatiable appetite for glamour and tragedy. Mansfield's passing in that Louisiana car crash had been front-page news worldwide, and the film served as both memorial and spectacle, creating an uncomfortable mixture of tribute and sensationalism. What made the film particularly disturbing was how it transformed genuine tragedy into entertainment. The footage of Mansfield's funeral, spliced between scenes of her performing in bikinis and evening gowns, created a disorienting experience that forced audiences to confront their own voyeuristic impulses. Critics called it shameless, even ghoulish, but audiences flocked to see a final glimpse of a legend. Whether you see it as a celebration or a cautionary tale, it's unforgettable, both as an artifact of 60s excess and as a reminder of how quickly celebrity can be repackaged even after passing. The Thrill Killers, 1964. Ray Dennis Steckler was the king of low-budget chaos, and The Thrill Killers is his crowning achievement in mayhem. Imagine a city terrorized by escaped psychiatric patients, each one a time bomb, each one desperate to leave their mark. Steckler himself stars as Cash Flag, because why not? and turns Los Angeles into a playground for unfiltered violence and randomness. Steckler represented the ultimate do-it-yourself filmmaker of the exploitation era. Working with whatever resources he could scrape together, he turned limitations into strengths. His guerrilla approach to filmmaking would later influence generations of independent directors who learned that passion and audacity could overcome almost any budget constraint. The film's chaotic energy reflected the social turbulence of mid-1960s America. As the country grappled with changing values and increasing violence, films like The Thrill Killers offered audiences a way to confront their fears about social breakdown in a controlled, cathartic environment. At the time, mainstream critics dismissed it as amateurish or incoherent, but for those in the know, it was proto-slasher gold. The unpredictable pacing, the rough, around-the-edges cinematography, and the genuine feeling of danger. These ingredients helped cement the film's cult status. Bans and complaints followed, but the film's legend only grew, proving that you don't need millions to terrify an audience, just a wild idea and the courage to shoot fast and loose. Scum of the Earth, 1963. Before Blood Feast, Herschell Gordon Lewis dipped his toes into another controversial pond with Scum of the Earth. Rather than splatter, this one trafficked in what became known as roughies, grim tales of manipulation, downfall, and psychological menace. The story is deceptively simple. A young woman looking for quick money gets pulled into the world of illicit photography, and from there, things spiral downward rapidly. Lewis understood that exploitation could take many forms. While Blood Feast shocked with graphic violence, Scum of the Earth disturbed with psychological cruelty and social commentary. The film reflected growing anxieties about changing social mores and the exploitation of young women in an increasingly permissive society. Lewis, drawing on his advertising background, knew exactly which cultural nerves to touch for maximum impact. Framed as a cautionary tale, but obviously designed to bait censors and spark outrage, Scum of the Earth rode the line between morality play and exploitation. Lewis's style was raw, using documentary-like visuals and quick shooting to create a feeling of authenticity. Critics called it tasteless, but the film's impact was huge, paving the way for a new kind of cinema that reveled in discomfort, blurred lines, and the challenge of getting something shocking past the authorities. Mudhoney, 1965. Russ Meyer was no stranger to controversy, but with Mudhoney, he aimed for something both provocative and epic. Set in a rural town falling apart under the weight of corruption, religious fanaticism, and unchecked desire, the film throws together a cast of drifters, hypocrites, and schemers. Meyer financed the film himself, pouring all his frustration with sanitized Hollywood into a project that was equal parts Southern Gothic, crime thriller, and over-the-top melodrama. Meyer's journey to filmmaking was as unconventional as his movies. A World War II combat photographer who had documented the brutal realities of war, he returned home with an understanding of violence and human nature that would inform all his work. His obsession with strong, powerful women wasn't just aesthetic, it was political, challenging traditional gender roles at a time when such challenges were rare in mainstream cinema. Critics were stumped. Was it a savage satire, a dirt-stained epic, or just trash with delusions of grandeur? Commercially, the film struggled at first, but its reputation grew in underground circles, where its willingness to poke at every taboo earned it cult status. The themes of moral rot and hypocrisy were a slap in the face to mainstream sensibilities. If you wanted a safe, comforting vision of rural America, Mudhoney was not it. Meyer's legacy as an outlaw filmmaker was solidified here, showing that pushing boundaries wasn't just about thrills. It was about tearing down the walls of acceptable cinema. Something Weird, 1967. Something Weird isn't just a title, it's a warning. Herschell Gordon Lewis, never content with a single genre, unleashed this psychedelic blend of horror, crime, and government paranoia, just as the summer of love was cresting. The plot, what little there is, mashes together a disfigured psychic, a seductive witch, shadowy agencies, and a parade of hallucinations. The timing of Something Weird was perfect. Released during the height of the counterculture movement, it captured the paranoia and disorientation that many Americans felt as their society transformed around them. Lewis understood that exploitation films could serve as a funhouse mirror for social anxieties, reflecting fears about substances, government surveillance, and the breakdown of traditional authority. Lewis leaned into the confusion, using garish filters, strobe effects, and abrupt edits to mimic the feeling of a very bad trip. Reviewers were bewildered, sometimes angry, but cult audiences lapped it up. For a country teetering on the edge between old-fashioned respectability and new counterculture, something weird felt like a dare. How much madness could you handle in 90 minutes? It's not about coherence, it's about nerve, attitude, and making the audience wonder what on earth they just witnessed. Satan in High Heels, 1962. Slinking onto the screen with a jazz score and a sneer, Satan in High Heels is a prime cut of early 60s urban sleaze. Stacey Kane, a tough-as-nails performer, heads to the city to remake herself, stepping over rivals and manipulating every person in her path. Filmed on location in real New York clubs, the movie drips with authenticity and attitude. The film captured New York City's underground nightclub scene at a pivotal moment in its history. Director Geraldine Trator chose to film in actual clubs rather than studio sets, giving the movie a documentary-like authenticity that bigger-budget films couldn't match. The result was a time capsule of early 1960s nightclub culture, complete with real jazz musicians and genuine atmosphere. What made Satan in High Heels particularly subversive was its central character, a woman who refused to be victimized and instead became the predator. At a time when female characters were expected to be either pure or punished, the film dared to present a female anti-hero who was neither sympathetic nor condemned. The film's subtle hints at same-gender attraction and power games sent the censors into a tailspin, especially under the fading Hays Code. Critics didn't know what to make of its grittiness, but it quietly resonated with audiences who saw, maybe for the first time, a different kind of anti-heroine, one as ambitious, complicated, and ruthless as any male counterpart. Fuego, 1969. Argentinian director Armando Bo and his fearless muse, Isabel Sarli, crafted a storm with Fuego, a film that sparked controversy wherever it played. It hit screens in 1969 with a tale of obsession and uncontrolled longing that burned through the country's conservative norms. The collaboration between Bo and Sarli was one of cinema's most intense partnerships. Their professional relationship blurred the lines between artistic collaboration and personal obsession, creating films that felt like fevered dreams, given cinematic form. Sarli's uninhibited performances challenged every convention of female behavior in Latin American cinema, while Bo's direction pushed visual and narrative boundaries that few directors dared approach. Authorities in Argentina called the film immoral and banned it outright, while censors in Spain, Brazil, and even some U.S. states followed suit. The film's frank depiction of female desire was revolutionary for its time and place. In a strongly Catholic society where women's roles were rigidly defined, Sarli's unashamed portrayal of passion was genuinely shocking. Critics dismissed it as trash, but fans saw something more, a woman owning her desires and refusing to apologize, no matter what the world thought. The film's combination of Catholic guilt, raw emotion, and fearless confrontation made it a lightning rod for controversy. Even after the ban, Fuego continued to smolder underground, a forbidden fire that censors just couldn't extinguish. Love Camp 7, 1969. If you're discussing the roots of Nazi exploitation, you cannot skip Love Camp 7. Set in a fictional World War II prison, it follows two undercover agents who infiltrate an enemy camp only to face a gauntlet of cruelty and humiliation at the hands of ruthless guards. The film isn't subtle, and its intent to shock is clear from the first reel. Love Camp 7 represents one of exploitation cinema's most troubling subgenres, the Nazi exploitation film. Created by directors who recognized that Nazi imagery retained a powerful capacity to shock and disturb, these films walked a dangerous line between historical commentary and sensational exploitation. The film's low budget and amateur acting only added to its uncomfortable authenticity, making viewers feel like unwilling witnesses to atrocity. Banned in the UK as unacceptable under any circumstances, it also landed on the notorious video nasties list in the 1980s, making it a prime target for seizures and underground trading. The film's lasting notoriety demonstrated how certain images and themes retain their power to disturb across decades. Critics universally condemned it, but that didn't stop it from spawning imitators and building a legend as one of the most infamous grindhouse titles ever made. Even now, it's rarely shown except in academic or underground circles. A forbidden relic from an era when shock was an act of rebellion. 2,000 Maniacs, 1964. Herschell Gordon Lewis followed up Blood Feast with this Southern Gothic nightmare about a ghost town that comes to life once every century to exact revenge on Northern visitors. The film combined Lewis's signature gore with genuine historical trauma, creating something more complex than simple splatter entertainment. The film tapped into real tensions about the Civil War and Southern identity that were particularly relevant during the Civil Rights era. By setting his horror story against the backdrop of historical violence, Lewis created a film that worked both as entertainment and as disturbing commentary on America's unresolved regional conflicts. The movie's carnival atmosphere and dark humor masked serious themes about memory, revenge, and the persistence of historical trauma. Lewis understood that horror could address social issues that other genres couldn't touch. Bad Girls Go to Hell, 1965. Doris Wishman emerged as one of exploitation cinema's most important female voices with this gritty urban nightmare about a housewife whose life spirals into violence and degradation after a traumatic assault. The film's frank treatment of female experience and violence was groundbreaking for its time. Wishman brought a unique perspective to exploitation cinema as one of the few women directing in the genre. Her films examine female vulnerability from an insider's perspective, creating works that were simultaneously exploitative and genuinely feminist. Her willingness to address taboo subjects from a female viewpoint gave her films a complexity that male-directed exploitation often lacked. Shot with documentary-like realism on the streets of New York, the film captured the anxiety and danger of urban life with uncommon authenticity. The film's low-budget aesthetic actually enhanced its impact. The grainy photography and handheld cameras made the violence feel uncomfortably real, while the authentic locations gave the story a documentary credibility that studio-bound productions couldn't match. The Curious Dr. Hump, 1969. Last, but absolutely not least, we have The Curious Dr. Hump, a film that is equal parts mad science, monster flick, and psychedelic nightmare. Hailing from Argentina, this oddball gem features a deranged scientist conducting bizarre experiments with the aim of prolonging life using methods that left censors fuming. Originally directed by Emilio Vieira, the film was later reworked for U.S. release. The international nature of exploitation cinema became clear with films like The Curious Dr. Hump. Originally created in Argentina as a straightforward horror film, it was transformed during its journey to American theaters into something even stranger. The practice of re-editing and adding new footage to foreign films created unique hybrid movies that existed nowhere else in cinema. The U.S. release ramped up the outrageousness even further by adding extra scenes, some shot without the original director's involvement, and patching them in with reckless disregard for continuity. This patchwork approach to international distribution created films that were genuinely surreal, not through artistic intention, but through the chaotic process of cultural translation and commercial exploitation. Critics savaged it, but the film's reputation only grew over time, proving that in the world of exploitation, coherence is optional, but audacity is essential. Still here? You've just journeyed through the wildest, weirdest, and most notorious films the 1960s ever unleashed. These movies broke the rules, shook the censors, and dared audiences to look twice. They showed us that cinema could be more than entertainment. It could be rebellion, commentary, and art all rolled into one shocking package. While many pushed boundaries for their own sake, others used controversy as a vehicle for genuine social criticism and artistic expression. These 19 films represent more than just shock value. They're time capsules of an era when anything seemed possible, even if it got you banned from half the theaters in the world. Whether you see them as trash or treasures, they undeniably changed cinema forever. Which of these forbidden films would you dare to watch? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep cuts from the dark side of film history. Remember, in the world of cult movies, the only real crime is not talking about them.